This is Access Approved, networking your way to your next job. We've heard from a few of these panelists already throughout the day, but so let me just give just a very quick introduction. Paul Cheung, to my left, is AAJA National President. He works at the Associated Press in New York. Angie Lau is based here in Hong Kong. She's an anchor and correspondent for Bloomberg News. Often see her in the morning. I often wake up to her in the morning as I get ready for the day. Steve Herman is based in Seoul. He is the Voice of America North Asia Bureau Chief, and as he just told me, his claim to fame has been the FCC president of both Seoul and Tokyo. Not at the same time, though, right? That would be good for diplomatic relations between the two countries. And also Sharon Chan, who many of you were just listening into on the previous workshop, is over in Seattle. I think many of you already know her. And we have a couple other folks coming in. And you know myself, Ramy Inocencio. I freelance for CNN.com, CNN Travel, as well as the Wall Street Journal online. So I'm just going to open this up. Since this is all about networking, I want to ask you guys first off, with your current jobs, and maybe you can tell what your current jobs are first, how did you get there, and what was the step or maybe the process of steps to get there that you can share and maybe people can learn from? So, whoever would like to go first.
So I got my job at the AP 3 years ago, but I have to lay the foundation for the network almost 5 or 6 years back. So you don't want to start networking when you need a job. You need to network when you don't need a job, and just talk to people because you don't know what people need. So when AP was going through a lot of transformation, I actually sent my resume to them with my contact. I was like, hey, I noticed that you're doing restructuring, and I actually have a lot of experience restructuring. And I came down to Miami Herald, restructured the team. Immediately the next day they say, hey, you know what, we have a job for you. So a lot of times when people think about, companies that are doing layoff, they don't have jobs. They have jobs. It's just different kind of jobs. So you just have to be able to, network your way through. Now, had I not have the relationship that I built from a couple of years back, I don't think I have the guts to just say, hey, you know what, you just go and do a big layoff. Here's my resume. Do you need someone to help you restructure your team? So I think, understanding that relationship, ahead of time could help build, your credentials. And even since then, a lot of times I would get people who just call me and say, hey, you know what, we have a job available. And that's because every single conference I go to or every single opportunity I meet, I make sure people know what I do. I don't really turn down opportunity. I'm always willing to talk and discuss, but not be pushy about it.
I echo what Paul said, and laying the foundation of solid relationships with peers and colleagues, even at rival news organizations. Because this is a very small industry, and the cream of the crop, whom I like to call my friends, that's all of you here, they're the best at what they do. And I admire their work. I often go to them for advice. And it's this kind of relationship building that when something happens and somebody thinks of me and they say, hey, what about you? What about me? That's great. Now, did I always know this? No, my goodness, I did not know that this was the secret ingredient to a great career. I had no idea until I started going to AAJA conferences. I really felt like I was this little island of one in this great sea of scary journalists, and I had no idea how to get to that huge landmass. I sought out people I admired, I sought out colleagues, and the people who helped me along the way helped me realize that we are all in this together. I joined Asian American Journalists Association, 10 years ago. And I have to say that this is one organization that has not only helped me grow personally and professionally, it helped me get to where I am today. It has groomed me through its executive leadership program. I go to the conferences every year. I sat where you sat, listened intently to the people who are speaking and sharing their personal stories. And it was maybe a couple of years ago, before I joined Bloomberg, that I had, at a networking event, exchanged cards with somebody integral to the TV team at Bloomberg. We hit it off. I made sure that I kept in touch, but in a respectful and friendly and professional way. Look at me, I want a job. Do you have a job for me yet? No. More like, here's some of the stuff that I've done. Hey, what do you think? What is some of the stuff you're doing? Hey, I know you're interested in that. Here's something that I think you're interested in, and creating. And she's actually a very good friend of mine now. However, it all started at an AAJA camp, actually, in New York, where this is somebody whom I had just met. And maybe 2 years later, after we initially met, she called me and said, there's this job, I want you to go for it. Great, let's do it. How do we make this happen? And a couple of months later, I joined Bloomberg. That's how I got where I am today.
Well, I made my first contact with VOA when I was 9 years old. So you can never be too young to network. Which is actually true. I wrote a letter to them. For some reason, they didn't hire me at that age. I still puzzled by that. But I had worked for VOA as an occasional freelancer for a number of years. Then I became a contract reporter. I didn't want to go on staff at that time for various reasons, because I had other outside work, and I was quite successful as a freelancer. And the second time that they approached me about coming on staff as a correspondent, I said yes, because I figured they probably weren't going to ask me a third time. So it can be many years, as you pointed out, before you end up working for someone to making your initial contact. I've never gotten a job through a AAJA event, but I've seen my role as more as a mentor with AAJA and looking for people that, not necessarily that I'm looking to give a job to this week, but some years down the road. And these types of organizations are incredibly valuable. We can talk a little bit more about the role of having a social media presence to get yourself out there and make contact in a virtual way with potential employers all around the world. But I really don't think that there is a substitute for that face-to-face contact, and then keeping in touch with people you make, finding casual mentors, more formal mentors. AAJA has a program, and I've played that role for a number of people over the years. And as a mentor, then you want to see the people that are your proteges succeeding. So that's also something to look at. Not only AAJA has those sort of opportunities, but other organizations. I'll stop there. I'll talk a little bit more about any specifics that I didn't cover later on.
So I am the Associate Opinions Editor at the Seattle Times now. I've been at this company for 13 years, but and before that, my first job out of college was at a magazine in Orange County, California called Orange Coast. And I got that job by doing an unpaid internship there. Fortunately, I could stay with my parents during the summer. And I was an intern who filed things and wrote these little tiny stories at the beginning of the magazine. And then they asked me to do a freelance story that was 2,500 words, and they were going to pay me $500 for my junior year in college, and I was like, whoa, mind blown. They're gonna pay me, and I didn't even ask them, and I didn't even pitch myself. And I was going to become a doctor, and like every good Asian kid. And when that happened, I was like, maybe there's another job out there for me. And I was just so clueless when I got my senior year. I wasn't even interviewing for jobs.
Do you know how much money you've lost not being a doctor? How you feel?
Yes, but the hours of sleep that I've gotten and these fine friends, as Angie mentioned. So I wish I had known about AAJA when I was a college student, and that's why I care so much about the organization. But anyway, I actually went to a diversity job fair when I was at that magazine. Oh, so anyway, the editor called me and said, we have an editorial job open. Do you want to come in and interview? I interviewed for one job. I got that job. 3 months later, I came back and started. And then I went to a diversity job fair, very similar to the stuff that AAJ does. In LA, when I wanted to find my next job, I met the Seattle Times then assistant managing editor, now executive editor, David Boardman. I went there as an intern. But I've had multiple jobs, and I would say even though I've been at that company, I've been at a different job every 3 years, and AAJ has helped me get every one of those jobs, whether it was through the executive leadership program, which changed my career. I would not be sitting here, I would not have served as AAJ president without ELP. So I highly recommend you make that investment in yourself and go. And I've gotten other job offers that has forced the Seattle Times to come back and give me a job I wanted within the company. And I can't deny the importance of just they're more than friends, but they're also my colleagues at AAJA. When they see my bosses, where they run into them, they say good things about me, which also helps my career within AAJ, within the Seattle Times. I have no doubt that one day I will end up working somewhere else because of an AAJ connection.
I mean, one thing about networking is, networking is not just about networking outside for a job. You really have to network across, up and down as well, right? So like Sharon say, you have to network across because these are the people who could potentially help spread your work. So when someone say, hey, a lot of people always come to me and say, hey, I'm looking for so-and-so. So I have to go back and okay, who do I meet, who I like, who I can make a recommendation for. I'm not their hiring manager, but because I can make that recommendation and people trust my recommendation, that means something. And managing down is also important, in terms of networking, because some of these, new people, they are your staff. There could be future leaders of the industry. So, it's really important to, when you think about networking, it's not one-dimensional, but it's actually multi-dimensional. And one of the biggest failure that people don't do is networking within their own organizations, right? So, you don't have to network your way out of, your company. If you really love your company, do internal networking to get a better job. I mean, Sharon had 3 amazing jobs at the Seattle Times, and that doesn't come from not networking.
So basically, from this first question, what we're hearing is basically laying the foundation, taking years, really, for many of us. And so cultivating those relationships and not expecting to get a job within a month or two or maybe even maybe half a year or something. I mean, case in point, for me, most recently I was CNN's business correspondent here. And 10 years ago, I think it was 10 years ago, I met my now very good friend who's in Beijing as a producer there. And when I met him, he told me he was a CNN producer in Beijing. And this was even before I wanted to be a journalist at all. And he said, yeah, I'm a CNN producer. I was like, wow, that's so cool. I want to be, I want to work at CNN too. And then little did I know that, 10 years later, I would be doing the same thing. I would be doing it. But it took me just meeting, the bureau chief over in CNN, Jaime Floracruz, and just being a friend of him, and then actually finding a freelance gig over New York with CNN, and then someone seeing me there and then asking me if I wanted to come back here. So it's just very circuitous, and you just don't know what's going to happen. But if you have a goal of maybe a company that you have in mind, or maybe an ideal job, then you can work towards that and identify key people, key network nodes, or just key mentors, like you guys were saying. I'm just curious, here in the crowd, how many people have a target company that they would like to work for? Anyone? Yeah, a few? or a dream job in a certain industry? Hopefully some people do. All right, yeah, dream jobs, definitely. Okay, all right, moving ahead. Steve, you talked about the use of social media, and I think I'll keep this on you because was it last year or the year before you were named one of the top Twitterers of where? Tell us more about that.
I don't remember the exact title, but it was the Daily Dot or something like that, for what it's worth. Named me. There was top 10 Twitters about news, and I was number one. And W7VOA. That's my ham radio call sign, actually. And I do happen to work for VOA, so it's handy.
And so for you with social media, what do you think is the most powerful tool to get your name out, to get everyone's name out?
I think it's absolutely essential these days to have a presence on social media, whether you are a aspiring a college student or a freelancer who's just starting out, or a veteran correspondent or editor. It doesn't necessarily have to be Twitter. Twitter, I think, works for certain things. It might be Facebook, and now there's all this other stuff out there that's coming up, Tumblr and whatnot, and there'll probably be something else next year. So I'm not necessarily brand specific. For me, what I do, Twitter works, and I think it's about 28,000 followers, which is, compared to my peers, is significant. I'm nowhere near Justin Bieber, I guess. But I don't think it's really the number of followers that you have. It's who is following you. And if you've got your peers, analysts, experts in a particular area that you cover, influential people in your own community, that's what's most important. And if anyone wants to know how to make your Twitter account most effective to work in a particular direction, I'm happy to talk about that offline, because I think most people in the media are actually not doing Twitter correctly. I know that's a subjective term, but I think in a lot of cases it's working against them. You have to be very careful if you're on social media as well, because if you're talking too much about your personal life, or you're getting you're a one-woman op-ed on Twitter on very controversial topics, it could work against you actually getting a job in the future. So you have to be very disciplined.
What's your number one lesson, I guess, just in the interest of time when using Twitter?
Figure out what you want to focus on. Don't try to be the AP wire and tweet the entire world. Pick a particular subject or geographical area. I am sort of a Northeast Asia wire service on Twitter because that's what I cover and that's what I'm interested in. I don't try to be witty on Twitter because I'm not a very witty person in person, and I just don't think it's going to work for me to try to crack jokes on Twitter. But some people, if you happen to be a particularly witty person, then maybe that's the sort of approach. It doesn't just have to be subject matter. It could be an extension of your personality if it happens to work in 140 characters or less with emoticons.
In addition to Twitter, especially when it comes to networking, everyone says that LinkedIn is the place to go. Curious what the panelists' thoughts are on LinkedIn. I mean, my LinkedIn is growing, but I'm not sure how useful it is. It just sort of seems people just add me because they want me to be in their network, but then after that, then they don't talk to me. But also for me, I don't add people if I don't know them or if I've never met them either. What do you guys think? How do you guys use LinkedIn, if you do?
I actually built out a pretty full LinkedIn profile where I put resumes, samples of work. I have random messages from people, recruiters, who actually say, "Hey, I remember the Daily, someone from Daily, who I've never met before, just like message me from LinkedIn out of the blue, say, hey, we have a job opportunity. Are you interested? I'm like, okay, sure. So I message back. I think, you have to use LinkedIn in combination of also your other networking skills, right? Part of the advantage of LinkedIn is you're able to connect with people and stay connected with them. Despite that, people move around. So, collecting a business card, that's what I do in that moment in time. But what LinkedIn allows you to do is really track how people move from places to places to places. And, leveraging that kind of relationship and really, it's just kind of, it'll help amplify your network beyond your physical presence. So I think, definitely I would do LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think it's really important to be on LinkedIn because I treat it as a proxy for someone's resume. So a lot of people are asking me, I guess from my AAJA days, do you know someone for this job? Do you know someone for that job? Internally and externally, I get asked this. And a lot of times I might not be in active touch with that person, so I might just send, if I can't reach them, maybe I'll send a quick list of 5 people and I'll link to their LinkedIn. So for that reason alone. Also, Krista Canfield on LinkedIn does a session called LinkedIn for Journalists monthly. And then if you do the session, it's really great training, for how to use LinkedIn for reporting sourcing, which I've found really useful. But also you learn things like how to tag your profile, which also helps you in your search engine optimization on LinkedIn. For instance, when I was covering Microsoft, I just threw up a bunch of topics I'd written about, and now I routinely get job stuff from Microsoft contractors for technical writing, which I'm not interested in, but it's kind of interesting.
I think that you need to pair social media with some really just, boots to the ground. And that physical face-to-face meeting is something that makes a mental imprint for me. I mean, I like social media, it's great, but it's also lazy and easy. And I want somebody who steps beyond that and shows me that they're reaching out to me in a really tangible way. The LinkedIn stuff is easy for me. I can check you out, your resume. It's absolutely crucial. I love it. But don't assume that that's the only thing that you need to get my attention.
I find LinkedIn to be wide but not deep compared to other social networks. If someone sends me a LinkedIn request, even if I don't know them, if they're sort of in a related field or maybe they're an academia and I'm interested in the subject, then I'll accept the request. I won't do that on Facebook. Facebook, I want to have the personal connection before I'll be friends. And on Twitter, obviously I can't follow everybody back that follows me on Twitter. And of course, probably 95, 98% of the people that I follow on Twitter, I've never met in person. So I think they all have different roles, and you have to keep on top of this because, as I said, next year there'll be something else that'll be out there, and this will be the tool. LinkedIn, I think in certain fields, it has been extremely effective for people finding jobs, and headhunters are really deep into LinkedIn. In journalism, I would agree. It's not going. You're not going to get a job in journalism by just posting your resume on LinkedIn. Do we need to take a microphone up there?
It's okay.
Okay.
Just go ahead.
I'm just wondering, aside from having a presence on Twitter, is there any way you can use Twitter to, again, make those specifically for networking, aside from following and being followed by someone you want to connect with? I mean, is there any specific you can use it for networking purposes?
Absolutely, because you've got the direct message capability if you're following each other, or the reply capability as well. And then when you're doing reply, you have to remember it's on your personal timeline, and it's basically anybody in the world can see it. If you want to have a deeper connection on Twitter, you need to make sure you're both following each other. Twitter, I think, more is about general discussions. I don't tend to get engaged in debates on Twitter because I don't want to get drawn into anything that's sort of opinionated advocacy. And also, I don't want to clutter my timeline on Twitter because people are following me to find out what's going on. But there are a lot of major journalists who do use Twitter as sort of the public forum to talk about issues and engage deeply with particular individuals. That's probably more of a topic. Again, I think there's a lot of, you have to be very, very careful with Twitter. I know some journalists for major publications that have gotten into big trouble by putting stuff out on Twitter that they should not have.
I think it's a little EQ practice, I guess, because we all use social media differently. Like every person has their own different personality online. So Steve, for example, just has friends on his Facebook. Me too. Twitter is more broadcast. Like it's everyone, it's friends, but also people who are viewers, people who are journalists, and then LinkedIn. So, but if you kind of, let's say you want to reach out to somebody that you really want to connect with on Twitter, right? If you look at all their postings, you kind of get a sense as to how comfortable they are if you reach out to them personally like that, and or are they more like Steve, where it's just really kind of, he's cold, man. He's just wrote tweets. But then, somebody else like Paul might be, oh, hey, what's going on? So if you have some good EQ skills and can kind of gauge how that person uses the social media in which you want to communicate, but there's also figure out what their business email is, reach out to them. If they don't respond, call them. You don't have my direct line, but you know where I work. And same with everybody else, right?
I mean, the great thing about social media is, before social media, you actually know nothing about a lot of people. So because of social media is a great way when you actually do meet that person face to face, you have something to discuss. You say, hey, you know what, I've been following you on Twitter. I think, bring, some of the tweets you mentioned really, get my jams up, So it's not like you just meet this person and have nothing to say to them. I mean, the great thing about social media is like, there's people that you aspire to be, you could begin tracking them. So when you do meet that person, face to face, you have something to talk about and not just like, hey, how are you? What's up?
Cool tweet, great.
Paul brings up a really good point, just the power of Google. Like there's this AAJA member I know, Owen Lay, who's a broadcast journalist in Seattle. Sometimes when he's in a conversation with people he doesn't know at a network event, he'll step away and like Google that person. And they come back and be like, so how is blah?
I would say that for someone that's a potential freelancer that I'm going to hire, I will admit also that I will check them out and find out if I don't know if I don't have a personal reference. But to me, still, primarily for anything serious, a project or substantial, I do want a personal reference from someone that I already trust. Again, you need to balance this. You can't just do everything virtual online. You've also got to make those personal connections too.
And that's a pivot that I want to go to, from social media to that face-to-face connection. Of course, for any job, we need and want to have that face-to-face connection, especially here in Asia, where we attach so much importance to face. But how do we get that face-to-face with that key person? The networking that all of you guys have available here is great, but this only happens once a year here in Hong Kong. So how do you get face-to-face time with, say, the bureau chiefs? Some of you talked with Elena Lee, with Ken Brown, and that was great. That's what this is here for. But then, getting that step, you're not going to be easily trapped in an elevator with one of them and give them your 30-second spiel.
In the old days, it was really easy. Just find the bar where the editor drinks. But there's still some truth to that. In certain cities, in Hong Kong and Tokyo and Seoul and Bangkok and other places in this region, there are certain places where journalists do congregate. There are foreign correspondence clubs or press clubs in many cities. Some are more active than others. In Tokyo, the total membership of the club is around 2,000, including associate members. In other cities, it's very small, but it's a tight group. And what I do find is there usually is a gathering in Asia, at least, in every city, at least once a week. There's usually one night. In Delhi, it was Thursday nights at the Foreign Correspondents Club. In Seoul, it's Friday nights. And so you need to get into that network and not just after 2 minutes go up to somebody who's there and say, hey, I'm looking for a job. Can you hire me? It's sort of like asking someone out on a date. You got to take it a little bit more subtly.
And as the correspondent board governor at FCC, I would encourage all of you to look into that as journalists. We are desperately looking to continuously grow our journalist muscle there. So please do join. And there's a great rate. But I will say as well that even if you're not a paying member of FCC, there are so many events, panels and speakers and luncheons and things like that you can join up and sign up as a non-member. But guess who you're sitting next to? People who are in the business. And you get to rub shoulders literally because you're sitting next to them having lunch. And that's how you network. Just surround yourself, find yourself in those situations where you are surrounded by people you want to know more about, that people you admire, that you want to follow, that you want to engage with. Just find yourself here. And I applaud all of you for being here because you're doing exactly that. And that's exactly what you need to do, is just kind of find yourselves in opportunities where you are surrounded by people who can help you and who you can help. That's also really important.
And I'm gonna one up Angie on in terms of not only do you want to come to events like this, but you actually should consider volunteering. I mean, there's a reason why Sharon was the former national president, and Ramy is on the board, and because when you volunteer for organization for AAJA or your student group, it's actually a really easy way to just meet people without the agenda of I want a job from you. Right, so I was doing AAJA National Convention programming for the past 3 years, and it's like the best thing. I get to call people and say, "Hey, I want to invite you to come speak," and then do just email exchanges. I suddenly have their contact, I have their phone numbers, and they think I'm organized, provided that I don't mess something up, and a lot of it is just really staying active. I mean, if you really are serious about your career, then you have to go above and beyond just doing a good job. Career management is another full-time job. When you want to manage your career, you have to really give that extra. When you volunteer for a group like AAJA, the easiest way to make these connections is, by inviting them to an event. Something as simple, like today's panel. I never met Elena Lee before. But I know I wanted her to come to this panel, so I just say, hey, you know what? We have this panel on leadership. We really want you to come. But now that we invited her to come, we want to make sure that she engage with us, right? So next year when you get an email from Ramy or any of the Asia chapters, say, hey, we're doing this conference again. We're looking for a volunteer. Absolutely, sign up because you don't know who you're meeting. So for the national convention, we always look for volunteer. And I remember one year we have volunteer, and where their job is to walk our speakers from where they're supposed to meet into the conference room. Why do we want to do that? Because speakers never pay attention to where they're supposed to be. And second, when you volunteer, you don't know who you're meeting. So, I mean, that's how a lot of us came across with people like Marcus and Ken and Lena. It's just through, these chance meeting. And by then, we kind of, establish that relationship and maintain it. And it's really important to maintain the relationship. And it's your job to maintain it, not theirs. And you can't always just email them, say, hey, do you have a job now? Hey, do you have a job now? Hey, it's me again, do you have a job? Just be really discreet. I mean, I remember I asked the same question, like, how do you maintain that relationship without being too pushy? Someone told me that once a quarter, just send an email, say, hey, here's 2 or 3 interesting projects that I'm working on. I want you to take a look. Or if someone win a prestigious award, say, hey, you know what? Great piece. I heard you guys won the Peabody. Congratulations. Oh, by the way, here's something that I did. I would love to get your feedback. So again, just maintain that relationship without. I mean, at the end of the day, everyone knows that you want a job, but you don't have to be obvious about it.
I would just add to what Paul said is that when you volunteer, you're not only building a connection with that person, that contact, you're building a relationship within AAJA and the organizers like Ramy and Wendy and Paul. And it's kind of like building your credit history. If you kind of have this casual relationship in volunteering that shows you can do your job, people will actually believe that you can do your job as a reporter and as a journalist. And then I would say, if you met Ken Brown or Alana Lee or Brian or Marcus, then your next job is to go back and figure out a way to make an imprint and make them remember who you are. You need to either send them a card, not just an email. You just send them a written card with maybe your resume in it, or maybe just your business card. Gauge how you want to be, so that that person has a little thing in their head. Marcus has said to me, I really like your stationery. Because I sent him cards whenever he did something good for AAJA.
One mentor of mine several years ago told me that you can always ask someone for advice, and they're willing to give it to you for free. Everyone has an opinion, so you can ask for advice from someone older than you, more experienced, to say, hey, can I get your thoughts on my career? And more than likely, they'll probably say yes, because everyone likes to think like they know more than they do, actually, right? In addition, we're journalists. Journalists like to drink. So ask them, even if you don't have a lot of money, and I see a lot of young faces here, ask them out for a drink and say, hey, can I take you out for a drink and get your advice on things? One drink isn't going to break your bank. So, and then you get that half hour, and then you have, this one-on-one time that is really valuable. And it might cost you maybe 50 Hong Kong, $7-8 US or something.
I like Lefroy single malt cask. I think it's about
that might break my
25 US a
budget,
shot.
Well, we don't have the Seoul Foreign Correspondents Club. Beers are only $2 US there, right? Is that what it is? $1. Gosh, yeah.
It could be coffee. I don't drink.
Oh yes, it could be coffee, but alcohol. Right here.
Also to Ramy's point, again, I remember, especially people who make an impression on me. First one was people that I rejected it from a job. So, there's this guy who applied for a job, didn't get it. And he wrote a really nice email back and say, hey, you know what? I would love to meet up with you and talk about, what is it that it takes to get a job like this. And I was just really impressed by, him not being disappointed, and came back and really want to find out what does it take for him to land a job at the AP to do, an interactive producer. I mean, I went and meet, and I remember this guy, and and I say, here's what you need to do, and if he is actually able to succeed, he could be a viable candidate. Again, you have to show that you're passionate and committed. And I always advise my students back when I was teaching Columbia is, you don't need any reason. Sometimes you just need to send an email, say, hey, I really love the work that you're doing. I would love to drop by to check out your operation. I mean, you never know.
Can I just give a real-life example of someone who I think combines all of these things, the people, the social media. So I mentioned her in my last session on op-eds, but her name is Ton Tan. We just hired her as an editorial writer. I met Ton when she was a scholarship winner for the AAJA Seattle chapter in 2004. And the next, she was at USC. She was a broadcast journalist. I'm like a print journalist, so I'm never going to help her get a job at a TV station anywhere. Next year, she's back home in Seattle. She says, hey, can we get lunch? Yeah, sure. And she's like, hey, how do reporters get all your stories? You know, just like advice questions. And then a few years later, I'm on Twitter, and I see she's on Twitter, so I start following her. At this point, she's gone from Idaho, Boise, local news, to Portland, local news, back to PBS, Idaho. And then she's on Twitter. And then I'm on Tumblr, and I see she's on Tumblr, so then I follow her on Tumblr. And I'm seeing her tweeting stuff about PBS and these kind of really hardcore public affairs stories that she's doing in Idaho. Then I see on Twitter she's gone to Texas Tribune. So you kind of see how she's kind of gone, like kind of kept me in the loop and kind of combined the in-person. At one point she emailed me because she was organizing a panel in Idaho and was like, would you come be a speaker about this topic, or can you recommend someone? So then I remembered her again, and we had an editorial writer opening, and I was like, I think she could be really good because she went to the nonprofit Texas Tribune. She was a writer, super cutting edge digital stuff. We interviewed her, we hired her. She got Dennis Rodman to tweet at Kim Jong-un.
Before we open it up to questions, I just want to add, whenever you do approach someone, just be as polite as possible. Because, you know, if you are in your face and you try to say, you know, like you were saying, I want a job, it's going to turn people off. You know, just be as humble as possible, because you're asking them for an in into a company. And for many people, it's a family and they put their life into it, you know. So just don't be too in your face. But if you were in Jane's talk earlier, know your worth, you know, she was saying, and also know who you are, know what you can bring, but don't be too much over the top. All right, I'd like to open this up to questions, and I think, Matthew, you have the microphone. So please raise your hands, and Matthew will come on over.
Okay, thanks very much. But I have a question. But what, I mean, obviously, it's good to connect with others. It's also good to meet your friends or mentors from time to time. But what do you do when you really ask for a favor? Have you ever tried to ask for a favor? And how do you deal when your friends or others say no?
Well, you don't start by asking for a job, like Paul said. You want to meet Hari Srinivasan. He's another AAJ Seattle Scholarship winner who is now a PBS NewsHour anchor. His mantra is make it easy for people to say yes to you. People want to say yes to you. They want to help. Like, I wanted to help all the students who came to me in AAJ and wanted to get a job. So you don't start with like the giant ask. Like, you know, you don't start with, will you marry me? You know, can I buy you a drink? Let's start there. So, but I would start with the assumption that they want to help you, because they do.
But also, the best way to get the yes is to convince the other person that it's a win for them. So yes, you want something from them, right? That's your favor. But a favor always feels like, I have to give you something and I don't get anything in return. That's not what you ever want to leave the impression with. I'm really good at this. This is my skill. And I noticed that you just laid off a ton of people, but you're restructuring. And this is something that I have experience with. Here I am. Okay, it's a win for you and it's a win for me. You just told me why together we can win. It's great. Make it easy to say yes. So I wouldn't really couch it as a favor. And if they said no, it's because you weren't able to communicate what is in it for them and what they will get out of it. So for example, what was it that you asked that got the no? Just curious. Oh, you don't have a specific example? Okay.
I mean, I also think you have to know, you know, what is it that you ask for, and is that person the right person to ask for that particular request, right? So, for example, you know, you're not going to go to someone, you know, like Marcus and say, I want a job. I want a job. No, you don't. I mean, you know, his he's so far high up that, if you have access to him, what you want is his Rolodex. Could he make recommendations for you to someone that can hire you? So again, it's just really understanding what is it that you ask for, and is that person the right fit? Because if you're gonna make it feel like work, then it's work. And it's extra work that no one wants to do. So you have to, like Sharon said, make it really easy. So just ask for things that's easy and small. If there's a job available, don't ask me to forward your resume to them. Say, hey, you know what? I noticed that you're connected to this person. Do you know anything about this person? So it could be a simple yes and no question. And then I might come up with follow-ups. It's like, would you like me to connect you guys?
Another question?
I don't have a question, but I wanted to give an example of something that can make it easy for somebody. Somebody recently asked me to write a recommendation for them. I don't really know this person, so my instinct was to say, no, I don't really know you and I can't recommend you for anything. But it's somebody that I vaguely know through AAJA who won an award for something substantial, so I guess his work is good. So I said, look, if you want to write a draft of the letter, I'd be happy to take a look at it and maybe I would sign that letter on your behalf. He said, that's a lot of work for me. And I said, okay, no recommendation from me. However, I recently had to apply for something myself, and I thought, my boss is busy. I'm going to write a draft letter for you, for me. And he said, cool. Then he just signed his name to it, didn't adjust it or anything. So
I did the same thing recently.
So, think about how you can make it easy for somebody. And sometimes you have to be your own best advocate.
I also just want to give an example for a student. So I forgot to tell the second half of Hari's story, which is when he told that story, he was talking about his first internship at King 5, which was the NBC affiliate in Seattle. And he was applying for an internship. And they were like, no, we're not interested. So he's like, here, let me tell you this. Why don't I come here for 2 weeks, just 2 weeks, and it's not paid, and just see how you like me. And if it doesn't work out, just say no at the end of the 2 weeks, and we'll call it even, no hard feelings. So he got in there for the 2 weeks. He was like, he worked his ass off, and he got coffee for everyone and carried the camera for the photographers, and he got the internship.
And he got paid.
Yes.
Same with one of my intern in Miami Herald. Again, when he first reached out to me, I'm just like, he doesn't really have the skill set. So I just, politely declined. Didn't stop there. He sent me 2 other emails. And, by the 4th time, just like, oh my God, this kid is so persistent. I have to at least give him a chance to meet him. And when I meet this kid, I gave him a test immediately. I said, okay, here's the 3 things I need you to do. And he actually passed the test, which I was really surprised because it just means that whatever he showed me, his portfolio, he just didn't know what to do with it. So he has the raw talent, but he just didn't present it in a way that, I understand it. So after he passed the kind of like the technical assessment test, I'm just like, that's fine, you got the internship here. And he's actually, really great as an intern, for Miami Herald. So again, you have to be persistent and not you're gonna hear a lot of no's in your life, and you can't just stop. And part of networking is, be able to flip the no's into yeses. And you can't just say, okay, someone say no to me first time around, so therefore I would never engage that person again. If you think that, then you would never get anywhere in our business.
I said this in my last session, but no does not mean never. It means not right now.
Does that work for dating too?
So Danny, my husband, is here. He's wearing a bow tie. Go ask him.
I think we have time for one more question.
So I was just, my fear is I don't know how to start a conversation because I always I'm so aware of myself being green, and then I know that I should it's communication is 2 ways. I have to offer something, but I'm not sure if I can offer anything to the professional journalist who knows a lot, and then I just
One thing I would say just off the bat is research them a little bit, research the work that they've recently done, whether it's print, read their latest articles, if they're, a correspondent, watch some of their videos, and then pick out a couple of things that you thought were really interesting so that when you meet them, you can say, hey, I really liked your article on such and such. Everyone likes praise. They're going to be like, oh, thank you. And then that's one in that I can see.
I would also say that your nerves may come from not knowing your elevator pitch, and this is something that I talked about in our previous panel. Who are you? What do you want to say? What is it about you that you want to communicate to this person? If I asked you right now to introduce yourself and to tell me one thing about yourself and what you want to get out of this conference, would you be able to tell me succinctly in 30 seconds? So everybody should have an elevator pitch. But do you have one? Are you ready to? Let's do it.
No pressure.
So, why would I want to do journalism? Because
Well, you forgot to tell us your name.
sorry, I'm San. So I'm a student from CUHK, just finished study, and I really hope to get into the industry. Well, actually, I love reading and I love writing also. But and I think journalism can train me and to really to be a good writer. And then I hope one day I can be a really good writer. So that's why I want to do journalism. But and I always believe that a good story never dies.
Right. And so that's your in. And what do you want? You're right. What do you want to learn from us? So know what you want to know from us. So, like, for example, if you came up to me and you said, how do I get into print? Well, I'm not a print person, so I can't help you, right? So just know a little bit about the person.
I'm probably even more brutal. There's out of 100 people that are approaching any of us for an internship even, what do you have that the 99 others don't have? Yeah, all these people have gone to top tier schools, 4.0 GPAs, degree in journalism, this part of the world, bilingual, trilingual. It's not enough. To get that slot, you've got to, in my newsroom, people say, do you offer internships? In my newsroom, I usually say no, because it's going to involve my time. I already work 12, 14, 18 hours a day, 5-6 days a week. The physical space is small. What do you have that's going to help me make my job easier today? What Hari did, someone to carry the tripod, go get coffee, just isn't going to cut it these days in a lot of newsrooms. I probably, if someone came in with the right collection of skills, I would bring them on as a summer intern. But video editing would be one thing that comes to my mind, that if somebody comes in and says, look, I've been doing Final Cut Pro for a few years. Let me show you what I've done. Here's, the following that I've got on Twitter. Here's my, Tumblr blog, et cetera, et cetera. Here's what I wrote, for my school paper, and I put together this documentary. That's the sort of things that at least I'm looking for these days if someone even wants to get an internship, let alone a job.
And to be really brutally honest, no one want to hear your lifetime story when they just meet you. So you have to know when to disengage. Always come with a game plan. What is it that you want to get out of, right? If you have nothing to say, it's okay. Thank them for coming. So it's just thank you, Ramy, for coming to the AAJA conference. I really appreciate your time. By the way, I would love to follow up with you sometime. Could I have your card? And then be done, right? If you have nothing else to say. Now, if you sit through the conference, you say something really interesting, then what you could do is, there's usually a big crowd of people, right? So pretend like they're all waiting, and it's hey, Ramy, I find this thing, what you say really interesting. You know what, it's really noisy. Can we walk over here and have a private discussion? So dominate them, and then do, really focus on something that really latches on. Don't be that awkward person kind of standing there hey, so
I really like you.
Can I give you my business card? I'm so know when to disengage is also really effective, because if you are awkward, trust me, we remember the awkward one. I'm just like, oh.
And it'll make us feel awkward too. If you're not confident in yourself, how can you expect us to feel confident about you, right? So
I just think you're going to go interview of sorts. The first thing you do is research them, right? So, and even if you don't use the information in the interview, Eric Nolder is an investigative reporter who said this, it gives you confidence because you know something about them. So do that at the very least. And then my husband Danny is a master of this. He will read up on like lots and lots of stories that writers he's fans of. Yeah. And he will go back and talk about not the story that ran last week, the story that ran 3 years ago, and how he really loved this one paragraph in it. And that makes an impression.
That's great for everybody's ego. And that's a great skill. But also...
last comment, Angie.
Also, finally, this
sorry,
conference...
you can continue this, sorry.
This conference is online. The programming has been up for weeks. The speakers are all out there. It's called the internet. You can Google everybody, right? And then you come up to the person and you're like, hey, you, what's going on? I know a little bit something about you, and here I am, and I think I can do something for you. Great, love it. Great to meet you.
All right. And with that, we end this panel. I'd like for you to all thank our panelists here for their time and opinions and analysis. Definitely remember what they've said. Now, before we end the day, we have to migrate back to T2 for some final announcements, and then the day is over. So if we can just do this en masse in one herd very quickly, just head on over to T2 and find a seat, and we'll let you go.